Good afternoon. Welcome to the Henry County Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee Candidates Forum. This is the first of several forums that we'll be focusing on, the one forum that we will be having during the primary season. First, I'd like to ask the audience for just a couple of quick instructions. If you would, turn your cell phones off, at least turn them to vibrate, but preferably off, and avoid any other noise-making devices. Also, we'd ask that the audience hold their applause comments till the very end of the forum. Please refrain from hallelujahs and amens and that sort of thing. I know that there are supporters of candidates here, but we would ask that. These forums actually require a good bit of work, and we have a number of volunteers that have been essential in putting this together, and I'd like to introduce our participants first. We have three interviewers, very qualified interviewers, who have done this many times in the past. First, we have Rhonda Seeger. She's an Assistant VP of Retail Sales. She's actually the Retail Sales Manager at United Community Bank. We also have Danny Stone. He's the Manager of Economic Development for Snapping Shoals EMC. Welcome, Danny. And lastly, we have Kenneth Kelly, and he's the Region Sales Manager for Georgia Power Company. Thank you all for participating. And last but not least, probably the most important position here, we have Ken Palmer as our timekeeper. Ken is President and CEO of the Henry Rockdale Market for United Community Bank. He's a guy that you're definitely going to want to pay attention to. Again, we're going to focus on two contested seats that primarily represent Henry County in the Georgia General Assembly. They are, and our first forum, is the Georgia Senate District 17, and also later the second forum is our Georgia House District 110. There are a total of 9 candidates in these two races, and there are actually no incumbents seeking re-election in either of these seats. A little bit about the process that got us to this point. Each candidate was requested to complete a questionnaire with 27 questions on issues of importance to Henry County. Those responses to those questionnaires will be or are posted on the Chamber website for the audience's review and for the voters' review here in Henry County. This is also covered by Henry TV 14, and they are also one of our sponsors. So I'd encourage each of you to go on www.henrycounty.com and look at the questionnaires as you're able. I think they'll be a very valuable tool for you as you look at the candidates and make your selection. The primary election, as most of you know, is on July 20th. We're going to observe just a couple of quick formats here so the candidates will be aware. Each candidate will be given a 1-minute opening statement prior to the beginning of the questions. Its timing will be very strict. Just to give you an idea of how we're going to conduct the timing, if it's a 1-minute opening or question, you will get an initial green light, green flag, indicating that the timing has begun. Halfway through, in this case 30 seconds, you'll see a yellow, and when you reach the 1 minute, in this case for the opening or the questions, you'll see red. At that point, I will start gently nudging you to wrap up. Those gentle nudges will become more forceful. Ultimately, we'll have to have a hard stop at 15 seconds past your allotted time. Each candidate will be given a 3-minute closing statement, and the order will be random. You won't know the order. And again, the timekeeping will be proportional. It'll be very similar. In this case, you'll see green to start. You'll get yellow at 1.5 minutes. You'll see red at 3 minutes to wrap up, and again, with me interceding if necessary after that. It's not too hard, is it? Great. Let me talk a little bit about the questions. The questions were asked and selected by chamber leaders through a series of email broadcasts to our members and to chamber leaders and also to the general public. You've seen the questionnaire. It was rather detailed. The questions today may be new questions. They're not necessarily from the questionnaire. So now let's turn our attention to the candidates. Our first forum is Georgia Senate District 17, which, by the way, includes all of Newton County, parts of Henry, Rockdale, Spalding, and Walton counties. There are 5 candidates running for this open seat. The Republican candidates, and I'm just going to read them to you, are Mr. Esther Fleming Jr. of Oxford, Georgia, Mr. Todd Hilton of Covington, and Mr. Rick Jeffries of Locust Grove. The Democratic candidates are Mr. Nicholas Day of Covington, Mr. Jim Nichols of Stockbridge. 2 of the 5 candidates in this race are participating in today's forum. They are Mr. Nicholas Day. Could you raise your hand, please? Great. And Mr. Jim Nichols. Thank you for attending today. I'm sure your responses will be very well perceived, and the group will be very interested. Please be mindful of the rules, both candidates and audience members. It'll help us provide a very informative, smooth-flowing forum. Time is always an issue with these types of events, and so we want to stay on time to the extent that we can. I'm going to start with selecting your opening statement. Mr. Nicholas Day, could you start, please?
Yeah, I want to thank you for letting me be here today. It's like homecoming to me. I worked for Henry County for 16 years. I was the assistant director of solid waste. I also dealt with the business license and the alcoholic beverage license. In my career, I moved into this building when it was brand new. So I look forward to working with all the people that I have dealt with their business license, because the small business is the backbone of creating new jobs. And we need new jobs now. We need to put people back to work. I think this is a great opportunity for me to address you as Henry County, those that I have issued business license to, and to the employees of Henry County. I look forward for you voting for me. I would like to be your voice in the Senate. We've worked together. We've lived together. Now it's time to go forward with me in the Senate in District 17. Please vote for me. You can vote for me now, early voting, or you can wait till July the 20th. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And now the opening statement of Mr. Jim Nichols.
First, thank you for letting me be here today. My name is Jim Nichols. I am 29. I'm married. I live in Stockbridge. I currently work at UPS, which means my alarm clock's going off at 2 in the morning, and I'm uploading trucks while most of you guys are sleeping, or at least should be. I attend Georgia State University, where I am getting my undergraduate degrees in economics and philosophy. I was the chair of the Henry County Democrats in 2008. I was a legislative aide, and I was a legislative aide of the year for Young Democrats in both 2008 and 2009. In 2009, I was a member of the National Advisory Board for Democracy for America, which is a national organization that works on getting everyday citizens into the process. It's truly tough times in the state of Georgia, and I look forward to the opportunity to sharing my opinions and my thoughts and how we can get Georgia moving in the right direction again.
Thank you. That concludes our opening statement for each of the 2 candidates. And we'll now move on to the interviewing phase of the forum.
Good afternoon. I'm Kenneth Kelly. I have the first question, and it's directed to Mr. Day. The 2010 General Assembly passed legislation allowing for a local referendum to determine whether Henry County should have the ability to exercise certain redevelopment powers, including the ability to create tax allocation districts and issue tax allocation bonds. Do you favor the creation of tax allocation districts in Henry County? If so, why? If not, why not?
What number was that question on our questionnaire?
That's question number 6.
Number 6. I basically, I said no, because I looked at it as another tax burden on the residents of Henry County. I thought Henry County was taxed enough. There should be an alternative way, cutting waste in one way or the other, but I thought as a tax burden on the county, and I disagree with that.
Okay. This question is now directed to Mr. Nichols.
I do support the initiative. I believe that local communities are the best place to make those kinds of decisions in regards to revenue. The state of Georgia does have a revenue problem. I believe I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually talking about the fact that we have a revenue problem. And when it comes to efficient, effective government, local governments and local citizens deciding what is best in terms of development issues is something that I support.
I'm on to Seegers. This question will be directed to Mr. Nichols. Concept 3 is the metro-wide vision for public transportation in the Atlanta metro region that was created in 2008 jointly by GDOT, Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, and the Atlanta Regional Commission. Do you believe, as the plan recommends, that heavy and light rail transit services should be expanded in the region? Please explain why or why not.
I believe 100% that it needs to. In fact, it should have happened a long time ago. Unfortunately, the Republican majority has failed to get the job done when it comes to transportation, and now most of Metro Atlanta is sitting in gridlock. Businesses are going to other states, and we have to get serious about having a 21st century infrastructure, and transit is one of the keys to that. So I am 100% in favor of those plans. I believe that, once again, we have revenue problems, and too many politicians want to talk about cutting taxes when we're continuing to fail in our infrastructure investment all over the state. So I think that getting Georgia moving in the right direction actually does mean literally getting Georgia moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Mr. Day?
I believe totally in a light rail system. We need some type of transportation to eliminate our Clean Air Act. We have a smog problem in the city of Atlanta, but with light rail and transportation, it gives us the ability to transport people to and from a job. So I think with light rail, we have the funds at the federal level, and that will give us the ability to create jobs locally. And that's what we need to do, is create jobs and improve our transportation. I know everybody's been to Atlanta and they realize, what a traffic jam it is. And that's why a lot of people came to the south side of town and work in Henry County, basically, to get away from the traffic problem. So I totally 100% agree that we need to have some type of light rail. They were talking about the one to Macon, and I would agree on having that one. And hopefully we can get that federally funded because the money's there now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Danny Stone. This question will be directed first to Mr. Day. Due to the economic downturn and corresponding decreases in revenues, education funding has been slashed. Teachers given furlough days, some teachers laid off, and class sizes increased. At what point will you consider developing additional revenues for education to ensure Georgia's public education system has enough funds to operate at a level that meets the challenges of the 21st century?
I think we need to look at the state. The state was supposed to fund our local education, and they have failed in that process. I know it is a critical time in our budget, and budgets are hard and tough. But, the promise of getting that funding from the state and letting that funding coming down to the local governments, we're missing that funding. And so that funding is creating a budget problem locally. Now, I believe in totally educating our children to the best of our ability, and at the same time, we need to look for other resources of funding, maybe the federal government in some way. But at the same time, we need that funding from the state of Georgia that they have been reluctant to pass down to the local authorities. Thank you.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes. Once again, it goes back to even before the recession. The state of Georgia ranked 49th in per capita spending in the nation. So when we now are looking at the 10th largest budget shortfall, the fact of the matter is we had a revenue problem and an investment problem in our infrastructure and our youth and our education system long before the recession. I think one of the first priorities we have to do is put a stop to the continual erosion of our tax base. The more we erode the tax base, the more we push the burden onto property taxes, onto working families, the less that we can be spending that money out in the communities. I believe that once we reevaluate the level of taxation, we can begin to address the funding issues. Over the long term, we have severe funding issues. The fact is that low-income families in Georgia, when you include sales, local, and state-level taxes, user fees, when you pile everything together, working families pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. There's no reason why the guy working next to me loading trucks has to pay a higher percentage and pull more weight than the rest of the citizens of the state.
This question will be directed to Mr. Nichols first. Do you support or oppose interbasin transfers of water in Georgia? Please explain.
I support with hesitation. I understand the concerns that Atlanta's going to suck up everyone else's water. Once again, we've got to go back to it, and I think it speaks volumes that the Republicans did not show up, because the Republicans have a lot to answer for in failing to address this problem. Water is an issue that everyone in the world has to deal with, and the fact that the state of Georgia has not addressed so far our water issue is unfortunate, because once again, businesses aren't going to come here. Atlanta dries up, the economy of the state dries up. So I do support it. I do believe that concerns with major metro regions sucking up all the water is valid, but I do think that we have to be proactive and make sure that we are using everything in our means to keep the state of Georgia heading in the right direction.
Mr. Day.
I think we need to look at it very carefully. You know, we need to be concerned about the intertransfer from the water basin, from one water basin to the other, because what are we doing there? So we really need to study that. I think there's a study in the state to set up a committee that will look at that and see whether or not we're at our best or non-best advantage to do that. I know now that Clayton County has a reservoir sitting over here in Henry County. And so we have reservoirs that have been in other counties that belong to other counties. So we need to look at creating more reservoirs. We need to look at our total water system and see if we can't clean it up. And there is a definite need probably in the future to have some transfers between the inner basins. But we need to be very careful about that so we do not actually take away from one place to the other the right to have good, clean water. Thank you.
I have the next question, and it's regarding health care. This year, lawmakers were faced with a $1.3 billion shortfall in the state budget. Legislation was introduced that would increase cigarette taxes by $1, and if matched with federal Medicare dollars, could have brought in more than $1 billion to the state. However, the bill never made it to either floor for a vote. Would you support a tobacco tax increase as a means to raise state revenues? Please explain. This is to Mr. Day.
100% yes, because tobacco basically is the culprit behind a lot of our health problems. We see it every day on TV and in the radio. We know now that tobacco advertising has gone away. We found out that the tobacco manufacturers actually enticed us to use their product when it had a deadly result. So I'm 100% for taxing the tobacco industry basically as high as necessary. Tobacco sales maybe be one of those things we don't even need in this country, because if the result is death, you know, why do we want to actually support tobacco? So I'm 100% for taxing tobacco as high as possible to increase revenue. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Nichols.
Yes, I too am 100% support of that. I believe that the state of Georgia ranks very low in the amount of taxes it applies to tobacco. I think that some states are getting to the point that they're way past the price elasticity of smoking. Therefore, the revenue, it isn't going to be a revenue solution in some states. But in the state of Georgia, because of the low levels, that would definitely be a place to find revenue. And not, as Mr. Day mentioned, not just the revenue issue, but also just the external cost and social cost that individual smokers end up costing the rest of the state. I believe, there's nothing wrong with people making decisions like that on their own if they'd like to smoke. That's fine with me, but there's no reason why the rest of us should be footing the bill in terms of healthcare costs and other issues. I think also an important point is that young people are extremely discouraged to start smoking with higher prices. So I think that that would be a perk on a number of levels.
Thank you. I have the next question, and this question is to be first addressed to Mr. Nichols. Do you believe that state government has grown too big and is involved in non-governmental functions? If yes, specifically which governmental programs or expenditures would you reduce or eliminate?
No. Is the fact of the matter is anyone who wants to go back to having a rural agrarian-based economy and a government the size of a rural agrarian-based economy, you can have that position, but I just think it doesn't make sense at all for us to continue eroding and cutting taxes and cutting programs. Are there things that the state of Georgia may be doing that I don't support or that I think could be cut out? Sure, but I think that everyone in this room probably has something they don't like. The issue is if there are programs we need to get rid of, if there are programs that we need to expand, you have to get the support. If you can't get the support, you have to pay for it. I mean, that's, we're all grown-ups here, is you have to fund your programs. If people aren't happy with a certain, program, I know we can all, throw temper tantrums and the government isn't doing its job and meeting, its obligations, and we need small government. We need a government that works. And if the rest of the state, if I can't pass cuts, I can't pass cuts. So there are lots of times where people don't like certain programs, and I understand sometimes. But I think that we need a 21st century economy and industrialized world. So,
Thank you. Mr. Day?
This is something that, if I'm elected to the Senate, I need to look into. Because when we look into the budget, which the budget is going to be a big problem in the future, that we can sit down and look and analyze that budget. And when we analyze that budget, that's going to tell us whether or not there is fat here or there's waste there. It's going to tell us whether there's unnecessary programs in the government or whether there's necessary programs. I think this is something from the Senate level, which we know we're going to vote on next time, because there's always going to be a budget problem for the next 4 or 5 years. So we need to look at this in a serious manner and say, this is something we need, this is something we don't need. And when we look through that budget process at the Senate level, then that's when we're going to know whether or not that item belongs in the budget or needs to be taken out of the budget. Thank you.
This question is directed first to Mr. Day. What is your recommendation for addressing illegal immigration in Georgia?
I think we should send anybody that's illegal in the state of Georgia home. Anybody that's in this country illegal, we need to send them home, period. I swore an oath when I joined the Air Force, and when I also became a candidate. When you go up and qualify, you swear an oath to uphold the laws of this country. So I 100% back the laws of this country. And when you say a person is illegal, to me that means they're illegally here. There's a legal way to get into the United States of America. We paid the price. We do the work. We pay our taxes. We're here legally. So I see that if we have any illegal aliens here, I think they take away from the job, the basic jobs. And you say, why is that? Well, I issued license to contractors. Contractors can't compete against a cash flow to illegal aliens. It's impossible with them paying the costs that they have to pay to contract. This used to be one of the counties that was #1 for 10 years, and now the housing boom has gone. So illegal aliens need to be deported. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Nichols?
Yes, I think that we've got to get serious. Supply and demand, if people are willing to hire, there will be economic refugees who come to take those jobs. If we want to get serious about the immigration issue, we need to throw people in jail if they hire illegal citizens or illegal aliens. I don't like the term alien, but with 10.2% unemployment, over 200,000 long-term unemployed citizens, I bet that as those jobs go unfilled, because businesses realize we're going to take it seriously and nobody wants to get thrown in jail, the wages will rise, which means that working families in Georgia will be getting jobs, better paying jobs, putting money back into their local economy. So that's a win-win situation. We have to get serious about immigration, but we can deport this batch and they're just going to come back because these are economic refugees, and we have to solve the problem of people being willing to hire for under minimum wages.
Thank you. This question will be first addressed to Mr. Nichols. What will be your top 3 policy or legislative priorities? Please list in order of importance.
Jobs. No. Running a sustainable budget, that's just common sense. It would be a top priority. We really have to get control of the budget. We're firing teachers when we should be hiring them. I think that standing up for our kids' educations is the next priority for me. As a high school dropout, I'm pretty passionate about doing it right the first time because I understand the challenges that people face when they aren't given opportunities when they're young. So I think that education would be the next step. Finally is election reforms. Every single candidate on this ballot, I would say on the stage, but the Republicans decided not to show, can promise everything they want, but there are systemic reforms that have to take place for us to end broken government. We need to lower ballot access so that independents and third parties can get into these local races. We need instant runoff voting so that we can rank order candidates, so that we can put political pressure on the two parties to be more responsive. We need election reform. That would be my third top priority.
Mr. Day.
You asked for 3, so I'll put down 3 of them. Number 1 is jobs. We've got to create jobs. Jobs create taxes. Jobs create people living in their own homes and seeking the American dream. Education is second. We need to educate everybody to the best of our ability. Education is a way to get jobs to this area. The more educated you are, the more ability that you have to have people come to this area. The third one was air, clean air, and water. As we talked about it earlier, we need clean air in the Atlanta regional area. We need also clean water, because they're going to be major components of a future county growth, whether it be in this county or our neighboring counties. These are major things that we need to take care of. Thank you.
Next question is going to be directed to Mr. Day first. What other policies and initiatives, if any, do you think the state should implement to spur our economic development and create the conditions needed for business to expand and prosper?
When we look at businesses prospering and expanding, then we look at the stimulus to give them in order to get them into our area, economic development. So we look at having trade zones and trade areas that we can actually, tax-free zones and trade areas, that we can actually entice these businesses to this area. I know that Henry County in the past, when I was over here in 1990, I've watched the growth of the businesses over here. They went from 1,600 businesses up to, when I left in 2006, there was 5,000 active businesses. So I've seen what can bring businesses to an area. And when you've got a good industrial development group that can bring the businesses here and you give them tax breaks. We gave tax breaks to Amazon.com, but unfortunately Amazon.com did not successfully succeed here. But the other distribution places are here. You have very large distribution places which also pay taxes on the inventory. So if you give them a tax break in the beginning, you will recover that in jobs and taxes later on in their inventory. Thank you.
Mr. Nichols.
We need to get smart about economic policy. Right now, 10.2 unemployment rate. We need to create incentives for work sharing. Imagine if, rather than having one person unemployed 100% of the time, we created incentives for companies to allow 5 employees to cut back 20% of their hours. That would keep more people working. It would keep more money going into the economy. It would just help the workforces just belief in our economy, because it's not just about the numbers. It's about, if people are concerned with what's going on in the economy, they're not going to be willing to invest. Entrepreneurs aren't going to get out there. So something like a work sharing program, which would create incentives to get businesses to cut back hours rather than fire employees, which means that when the economy does turn up, and it will turn up, those companies already have trained employees that are able to jump right in and up production.
This question is directed to Mr. Nichols first. What will you do to address needed improvements to Georgia Highway 42 and the extension of Georgia Highway 20 westward to I-85?
Well, first off, we're going to go back to the revenue issue. Our transportation network, be it transit, be it roads, we've failed to properly invest and keep those updated. As to specifics, I would have to leave that to experts. I'm going to be quite frank, I don't know the best solutions to those, but I believe that there are a lot of people that know a lot more about ways to fix the specifics of those roads. But I do believe that a top priority for us in the Senate and the legislature is to make sure that we have the funding so that we can address, not just in our area but all across the state, because we depend on a functioning system of roads and thoroughfares so our businesses can thrive.
Mr. Day?
I think we ought to 4-lane 20 and 42, and I'll add one. I think we ought to 4-lane 81 all the way into Covington. We're looking at these as major thoroughfares. So if we get major thoroughfares in this area, then we have the ability to attract more businesses. And that's the main thing. If we 4-lane 20, great. That'll give. We've created a lot of traffic jam due to the fact of the tremendous growth. In the 10 years that I was here in the housing, we had a lot of houses built here, and we created some bottlenecks. So we need to look at a way to undo those bottlenecks. 4-lane in 42, 20, and 81. I look for those as a way to create jobs. And you say, well, how do we fund them? The federal government has funding for transportation right now. They are reaching out right now. We need an individual that stands up and goes up there and says, we want your funds. We want to look at all the billions of dollars you got up there that you say that you're going to give for the transportation of local areas. We need to actually go to the federal government and look for that funding and acquire it. Thank you.
This question will be addressed first to Mr. Day. Do you support vouchers for public education? Do you support charter schools?
I say no to vouchers because I'm a product of public schools. And I think the more that we take money away from public schools, then the more we've got a problem already with their budget. So why should we create vouchers? And if you really understand the voucher system and you look, that means the school can set up somewhere as a private entity, as a business. So what are we looking at that's going to regulate these places that are going to get these voucher monies? So I think it's too complicated from that standpoint, and it decreases our ability to educate the public. So I say no to vouchers. Now, as far as charter schools, I'm open to that. I'm open to the process of seeing whether or not that is an alternative to the public schools, and that is a helping hand to get in there and can be funded properly and looked after properly by the government or the local government authority. Thank you.
Mr. Nichols?
In theory, I have nothing principally wrong with either of those two, and I understand the concerns about the education system. Practically speaking, though, we have to get a hold of our current school system problems, and the bargaining and the deal making that will go along with trying to implement one or either of those two things would just end up further eroding the revenue and the commitment that our state has to the public education system. Every child has a right to a quality public education. And in terms of charter schools, more and more the research is coming out questioning whether they are always producing the right results. So we do need to find innovative ways to improve our education system, and so I'm not opposed to either of those, but before we start subsidizing private schools and before we start changing how we do things, I think we need to get back to basics and get a hold of the core issue, which is a quality public education for every child in this state.
This will be the final question, first directed to Mr. Nichols. What will you do to encourage and support a One Henry approach to collaborative decision-making and leadership?
First and foremost is we just have to, politics is about personal relationships in the end, and I think that the more we can get community involvement, the more we can bring people together and see a common goal. I think right now our political climate has reached the point of hyperbole and fear and rhetoric that's just uncalled for. One of my opponents was actually saying the federal government's holding a gun to our heads, which is offensive because all over the world people are literally having guns held to their head. So I think that first and foremost is just finding common ground and working to nurture that communication and dialogue to figure out what that common goal is.
Mr. Day.
Basically, I look at it that we're all in this together, and the government should be for the people, by the people. And in the groups that we're in, we have a little bit of Henry, we got all of Newton, we got Walton, we got Spalding, some of Rockdale. I've lived in Rockdale. I've worked in Henry for 16 years. I live in Newton. I see good parts about each county and how it's run. I would like to get together with those counties and the leaders in those counties and put them together and work toward improving District 17 to increase the job market here, and at the same time take from one county or another county and move something to that county. Give them the ability to look at Henry County, for one reason, as senior citizens. I think Henry County's got the best senior citizen system that I've seen. I think that should be shared with the other counties. At the same time, I think the ability to Henry County to attract business here, that can be shared with the other counties. I think we need to share our understanding and thoughts on how to create jobs in District 17 and make us a better place to live. Thank you.
Great. That concludes the interviewing portion of our candidates forum for Senate District 17. I again want to thank our very polished and esteemed group of panelists for organizing and running the questions so efficiently, and also want to thank the candidates. There was no admonition for time. You guys did an excellent job of staying within the allotted time. It is now time for your closing statement, and I'm going to reverse the order and call on Jim Nichols to issue a 3-minute closing statement to the audience.
First, thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here. And I always forget this, so I'll say it at the beginning, jimn2010.com. Also, I have a personal blog that you can link to from there that deals with economic and current events as well. So I won't be surprising people at the last minute with the way I vote and the opinions I hold. And if people want to influence my vote or let me see things that maybe would change my mind on something, they're always willing to email me. So I'm one of those open source blogger politicians. But I said at the beginning, times are tough in the state of Georgia. It's unfortunate that my Republican opponents did not come out today because they have a lot to answer for. They can say Barack Obama's name as much as they want, but the fact is that they have the majority in this state, and they have run this state into the ground. At some point, fiscal conservative came to mean fiscally reckless, and it's time for Georgia to get headed in the right direction again. My generation is being handed a broken government, a broken budget, and I believe that my generation deserves a voice in Atlanta to articulate our vision and make sure that we are protecting our future. We need to bring election reforms. We need instant runoff voting to put political pressure on the two parties to be more responsive It's unfortunate that there aren't any independents or libertarians on this ballot, and there are a number of ballots as well. I go to events all over the place, and people wish they had more choices. I agree. The Republicans failed as a majority party, and the Democrats failed as a minority party. The minority party is supposed to be an opposition party that brings in the new ideas, that brings in the compromises. They failed as well. Lastly, I go around and I see a lot of people struggling, but I also hear a lot of me, 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 me. And I think that we really got to get back to basics, and we've got to look at everyone in this room is blessed and privileged to be here, and the sky isn't falling. Things will get better, and a lot of the rhetoric and hyperbole is uncalled for in our current state of affairs and the political climate we're in. So cooler heads will prevail, and we just have to make sure we are making the right decisions. We need someone that understands economic policy. We need someone that understands that we need efficient, effective government. The purpose of government is to protect and empower its citizens, and the state of Georgia is not doing its job. Everyday citizens have to get involved. My best friend Tanya died from heroin addiction a number of years ago because she couldn't get the mental health treatment she deserved. And I was speaking to a voter the other day, and she goes, you know what, she made some bad decisions. And I said, no, ma'am, she was a babbling psychotic. And it really speaks volumes that our most vulnerable citizens are held with such disregard and such contempt. It's time to get Georgia moving in the right direction again. It's time for a new generation of leadership. It's time for Jim in 2010.
Thank you. Mr. Day, your closing
Well, I want to thank you for being here. It's like homecoming to me. Coming in this building, you know, I came in this building when it was brand new. I was in the building department then, and later on I moved to the tax commissioner's office. So I look at all the things that are going on in the last 16 to 20 years, the growth in Rockdale, the growth in Henry, the growth in Newton, and I also see the downswing. And we're all in this together. We're all here together. This is one place that we can all get together and vote. Your vote's very important. You need to have someone in the state senate who is going to vote your voice. And I look at it this way. I am retired, so I can work for you 100% of the time. I don't have another job to go to. I'm not looking for a golden throne to sit on. I'm not looking for something to put on my resume. I'm looking to be the voice for the people. I do not belong to a lobbyist group. I do not belong to special interests. I want to vote for the people. If there is a county employee that wants to talk to me, I'd be glad to talk to them. If there's a voter that wants to talk to me, I'll be glad to talk to them. Anybody here that has a voice needs to get out and vote. The early voting's on now. You need to get out and vote. That is your most important thing you can do. You need to vote for somebody who's going to stand up for you. You can come to me at any time. I have worked here for 16 years. I was always fair, whether it was in the landfill or whether it was in occupational tax or alcoholic beverages. I reach out to the businesses that I've issued a license to and say, here's your chance to come to someone who will care about you and vote your way. You can come to me and I'll guarantee you that I'll vote for the citizens of this community and the other communities. In fact, I want your input. Later on, you can get together and as groups, or you can email me at daynicholasp@yahoo.com, and I'll be glad to answer you. At the same time, I'll be glad to receive any input that you have to me when I'm elected to the Senate, so I can vote the way you want me to vote. I'm not looking to vote for special interests, and I'm not looking to vote for lobbyists. I believe I believe government should be by the people, for the people, and that's the way we should move back. We should move back to where we actually, the voters, run the government and not the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That concludes our first forum for the Senate District 17. Again, I want to thank all of our participants and also the candidates for participating today. I also wanted to thank Julie Griffin. Julie, I'm sorry I didn't mention you earlier, for your assistance in coordinating this event. We're going to take a short 10-minute break, to stretch our legs, and then we're going to be coming back with the forum for House District 110, which is a contested race here in Henry County as well. So I hope you will join us for that forum, and we'll take that 10-minute break now. Thank you again to the candidates for your participation. A round of applause.